When I was in high school, I liked dropping acid. One of my favorite books was The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, which tells the real-life story of a band of early acid heads and proto-hippies called the Merry Pranksters, who invented a lot of what would become tropes of the 1960s, such as dressing up in weird shit and riding around in a painted bus while stoned on drugs. I was especially intrigued by an experiment which was carried out by the pranksters in 1965. One day, a few of the pranksters put a sign on the front gate of the group's compound that read, "The Merry Pranksters welcome the Beatles." At the time, the Beatles were the biggest band in the world, and the Merry Pranksters were largely unknown. Moreover, none of the pranksters actually knew the Beatles or had any idea of how to contact the Beatles, nor did they make any attempt to do so. For the Beatles to show up at their house in California was extremely unlikely. Despite all this, the pranksters put this crazy banner out on their front gate, and they fully expected the Beatles to show up. To understand the pranksters' behavior, you must understand the effects of LSD. This is true in a general sense, and with specific regard to that banner. You see, sometimes when you take LSD, something strange happens. Something beyond all the weird hallucinations and thought distortions. Sometimes you get the eerie feeling that coincidences are happening all around you. You might be listening to music while watching TV and notice that the pictures and the sound seem to sync up. You might open a book and notice that the opening passage has an odd, unmistakable relevance to the current moment you are in. At times, you almost feel like you are conscious of things before they actually happen. You imagine your friend walking through the door, and a moment later, she does. You look at your phone, and a moment later, it rings. Sometimes these coincidences pile up so quickly that you get the feeling that there is something behind it all. That all the seemingly disparate and unrelated phenomena of your life are actually part of an underlying order, or pattern, or structure, which is normally hidden. This order seems to be a cosmic phenomenon that pervades and controls all of existence. Something which has always existed but which you have been blind to until now. The existence of this fundamental order comes as a revelation because it is completely different from the ordinary mechanism of cause and effect that you are used to, that science uses to explain things. This feeling, to me, is the essence of the LSD experience. LSD leads to a sudden awareness of meaningful coincidences, which, in turn, gives rise to an awareness of an underlying cosmic order, which is acasual. The acasual part is important. A true coincidence is when two things happen, which are clearly related, but which cannot possibly be related by cause and effect. For example, let's say you are watching a show on TV about zebras. Then you walk out your front door and see a zebra trotting down the sidewalk, dropping zebra shit all over the place. The two events have an obvious connection, but it's hard to imagine how that connection could occur through cause and effect. It's not likely that your TV viewing choices cause that zebra to escape from the zoo, nor is it likely that the two events have a common cause, unless somebody is playing an elaborate prank on you. Such a coincidence could be considered meaningful if you believe that it is evidence of the aforementioned underlying order. Otherwise, it's just some weird shit that happened randomly. During my high school years, because of my little LSD hobby, I became obsessed with meaningful coincidences. I was always looking for little signs from the cosmos and hidden connections between things, which weren't casually related. I tried to predict things. I looked for symbols and tried to fit the events of my daily life into cosmic patterns. I got into Nostradamus, the I Ching, Stitchomancy, all sorts of shit. Unfortunately, my attempts to ascertain the underlying structure of the cosmos were heavily clouded by my own immature narcissism. you'll notice that people who believe in past lives tend to see themselves as great figures of the past like Caesar and Van Gogh, rather than the anonymous turnip pickers and fishwives who actually populated most of history. Similarly, I was convinced that the cosmos was sending me indications my impending greatness, rather than portending my eventual descent into alcoholic mediocrity. Yes, it was revealed to me that the world would end soon. I'd be a Christ-like figure of greatness in the coming apocalypse. I shit you not, I really believe this stuff. Luckily, blogs had not become popular yet. Then, I took my final acid trip. And it was a bad trip. I don't want to go into the details, but let's just say that I saw some shit. And I never wanted to take acid again. All my life, I had been hoping to be visited with the grand revelation. And now I just hope I was never visited by another one. It filled my head with all sorts of crazy shit. Not truth. Just madness. I decided that whatever was underlying the cosmos could stay underlying the damn cosmos. I wanted no part of it. Well, I guess I should tell you what happened with the Beatles banner. In putting out that banner, the pranksters had hoped that they could tap into the underlying acasual order of the universe by simply welcoming the Beatles, rather than reaching out to the Beatles or pursuing them. But the Beatles never showed up. At least, they never showed up in a literal sense. A couple years later, the Beatles released the Magical Mystery Tour film, in which they all dressed up in weird shit and rode around on a painted bus while stoned on drugs. Precisely as the pranksters had done. So, in a sense, they did come to the pranksters. Of course, this can be explained by ordinary cause and effect. The pranksters helped popularize a social movement which eventually spread to England. Or you can invoke a mystical explanation, saying the pranksters somehow sensed that the underlying pattern of the cosmos would bring the Beatles around to their way of doing things. After I stopped doing LSD, I started leaning away from notions of cosmic patterns, and I became more convinced that any understanding of the universe would have to rely on cause and effect. My earlier attempts at mysticism began to look like embarrassing folly. I came to regard all that meaningful coincidence stuff as bullshit. I figured that LSD just overstimulated whatever sort of coincidence detector might exist in the brain. You could dress it up in a fancy word like synchronicity, and give it the imprimatur of Carl Jung or whomever. But it was nothing more than magical thinking, as old and stupid as Stone Age tribes. I had been perceiving connections between things where none existed. There are no meaningful coincidences. A coincidence is only meaningful if you can find a casual relationship between the two. And if you can, it is no longer a true coincidence. The universe doesn't send people signs through the I Ching or Nostradamus or any of that silly shit. If there are rain clouds in the sky, it's a sign you should carry an umbrella. That's an actual sign from the universe. The other stuff is just a load of crap. It was with this mindset that I entered AA years later. AA is a God-centered program. The main idea is that you can get sober if you live according to God's will, instead of your own will. People in AA often talk about watching for signs from God, and listening to instructions from God, and so forth. As you can imagine, I was less than impressed. I was appalled. I felt like I was being dragged back into this narcissistic, mystical bullshit that I had thankfully left behind. I felt like I was being asked to roll back my personal age of enlightenment and go back to the Dark Ages. Fuck that. I wasn't going to do it. One night, at a meeting, after months of listening to the spirituality shit, I made my feelings clear. I told them that spirituality was the hugest load of horse shit ever foisted up upon human culture. Spirituality, I opined, was like a thought virus that gets passed on from one person to another. It was basically gonorrhea of the brain, and AA was one of the biggest fucking disease vectors I had ever seen. I told them they should be ashamed of themselves for preying on people who are in a vulnerable state just to convert them to their bullshit spiritual beliefs. Rather than the stunned silence that is the dream of every R-atheism subscriber, they just told me to keep coming back, and moved on to the next guy. It turned out that little rants like this are a semi-regular occurrence. Having no other good options, I kept coming back. I asked a lot of people why they believe in God. They almost invariably brought up meaningful coincidences or magical signs. I became more convinced than ever that it was all bullshit. I argued a lot with one guy in particular. In recovery, you meet a lot of people who are like Ned Flanders with tattoos. People who lived dirty, then cleaned up and became extra square, but they still have their tattoos. This was one of those guys. He told me a story about how he was in prison, at the end of his rope, and he prayed to God to send him a sign. Just then, a little bird alighted on prison window and sang him a beautiful little song. God, he knew, at that moment was real. I almost dislocated my eyes, they rolled so hard. What a bunch of silly shit. How could a grown adult believe this crap? I read the AA literature, mainly to bolster my arguments against the program. AA literature is very sneaky. It knows that most atheists follow the tradition of Western secular humanism, which values open-mindedness in contrast, the closed-mindedness of religionists. So the literature portrays atheism as closed-mindedness. Atheists are encouraged to be more open-minded, more flexible, more willing to accept the idea that they don't know everything about the universe. I wondered if it was fucking opposite day. How are these spiritual nutcases going to portray spirituality as open-mindedness, and atheism as closed-mindedness? I was simply asserting that my entire life I had never seen any convincing evidence of God. That wasn't closed-minded. That wasn't presumptuous. It was the opposite. I was willing to accept the evidence presented to me by the world, unlike religionists who turn a blind eye to it. I told heavy metal Ned Flanders that if the skies ever opened up to show me the majestic glory of God, then I would be happy to fall to my knees, because either God existed, or I was in the presence of a technology advanced enough to be godlike. I told him that I was perfectly willing to believe in God, if I was ever presented with a shred of credible evidence for his existence. Soon after, I was presented precisely that. Who knows? Maybe it was a coincidence. I think it's possible it could be written on the fly. The story gives the appearance of vast scope because the storylines are from different eras and areas. But rather than a broad panorama, it only provides thin slivers of insight into each time and place. Everything in between these slivers is left to the player's imagination. And given the author's hints at branching timelines, he or she is not even necessarily required to link these little slivers together. People also point to the various stories' interconnectedness, and claim that the work has a structure too intricate to be improvisational. But how much interconnectedness is there really? For example, the Stone Age story has cats in it, and the cat story has cats in it, obviously. This is a point of similarity, obviously. But what is the significance? So what if both stories have cats? Is this meaningful coincidence or a meaningless one? The same question could be asked about the children of the forest, or the various marines, or the demon penises, for which the author has such fondness. Yes, these elements recur, but to what end? Perhaps like somebody on LSD undergoing a false revelation, we are drawing connections where none really exist. Perhaps these are meaningless coincidences. The story employs a number of callbacks where it makes references to something which was not mentioned in quite a while. This gives the appearance of careful pre-planning. But callbacks are actually a pretty easy thing to improvise. The author can just look over the story, pick an element, and bring it to the fore again. Like a prime factorization problem. The problem is easier to create than it is to solve. A successful callback is really more of a testament to the reader's intelligence than the author's. And by the way, whatever happened to Companion 12? That seemed like it was going to be a thing. But anyways, all this is speculation on my part. It's an interesting question. How can we know whether the story's improvised or not? The author does occasionally make direct responses to other Reddit comments and makes reference to current events. But as you said, this could just be a sort of superficial improvisation, where most of the story is actually fixed, but a few of the details are improvised. The author could also be combing through Reddit for the right comment to give the appearance of improvisation. Are we watching real choices in action? Or are the events of this universe occurring along some deterministic path? Is there any way to find out? Maybe some sort of test should be devised. But that would require the author to play along. Okay, now I'm in my bedroom. The bedroom smells like bedroom. Actual bedroom. So definite. It smells like wood and blankets and stuff. Sharp. I wonder how they decide on the bedroom smell. I move my arms around and bounce a little on the bed springs. My body feels really natural and comfortable. Everything looks sharp too. There are no weird color trails like an acclimation. Cool. Really crisp. I stand up and take in all the little touches. It's an attic bedroom with a slanting ceiling and wood panel walls. Night outside the window, mood lighting from a nightstand lamp, clothes and a skateboard and other random teenage stuff scattered on the floor. Walls covered with posters, INXS, The Cure, Michael Jackson in a yellow vest. Very definite. Or should I say, groovy. Did they say that in the 80s? An interrupt comes through. Atlanta completely destroyed in full scale. I use my illegal bypass to cut off all interrupts. Ugh, I hate sports interrupts. I'll have to figure out how to change that setting. I notice a can of Pepsi Free sitting on my nightstand. I pick it up. Still cold. I crack it open and smell it, and the fizz tickles my nose. It really smells like soda. I take a sip. Wow. Not very good. Maybe it's a low-quality render. Or maybe I just don't like Pepsi Free. It's pretty amazing to be tasting something in a feed. This was really worth it. The doorbell rings somewhere downstairs. Oh, definitely. We're starting. I head towards the door and catch myself in the mirror. I'm supposed to look like a girl named Brooke Shields at 18 years old. Wow, she's pretty. What a render. The eyebrows are a little intense though. I consider toning them down, but I don't want to get caught up in character design. If you change one thing, you end up changing 50 things, and it goes on forever. I head out into the hallway and pause for a moment. The smell just changed. Now there's a hallway smell. Carpet and drywall. I laugh. I take a step back into the bedroom, and the bedroom smell returns instantly. I step into the hallway again. Hallway smell. Bedroom smell. Hallway smell. Bedroom smell. I snicker at this. The smell changes just like that. Why can't they make it more natural? What a giveaway. Oh well. I head down the stairs, The furniture in the front hall looks really cheesy. I pick up a lamp and toss it at the wall. It smashes apart, and the bulb explodes with a spark. I look at the shards. There's bits of powder and all sorts of little details. Yow. Very certain. Undo that, I say, and the lamp fades away and reappears on the side table. I open the front door. A guy stands there with swept-back blonde hair and a baggy red and black jacket with a collar popped up and sleeves rolled up. Nice. He gives me a killer smile and says, "Hey babe, what took you so long?" A blast of electric guitar hits me, and the guy floats up and over the front lawn, becoming 2 stories tall and striking a sexy pose. Colors fill the night sky, sparkling starlight showers him, and synth beat kicks in. An announcer shouts, "Corey Lancer, high school hotshot and rock and roll renegade. He's a fast talker with a slick attitude, a guy who can make anything happen. All the girls want him, but all he wants is one thing, the Ferrari 288 GTO." A red sports car comes flying out of the sky and does crazy circles around Corey while he strikes more sexy poses, and the music thumps. "It's the fastest street-legal car in existence, only 272 produced. This is Corey's dream, Corey's obsession, Corey's life. He'll do anything to get one, and he needs your help. Can you get the car? Can you win his heart? Are you ready for 80s turbo ascension?" Shit. I should have looked the summary closer. I'm not really into cars, and this doesn't really seem like a very interesting narrative. Still, Corey is really well rendered. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a bit of a mischief in his smile. I like it. I wonder if he'll be controlled by an AI or a Filipino. He floats back down to me and returns to normal size. "So, what's up?" he said, with a devilish little grin. Wow, this is A stuff. "Just doing my hair," I say, flicking my huge brown mane off my shoulder. This Brooke Shields lady has an absurd amount of hair. "You chicks," Corey says, leaning forward and giving me a kiss. His mouth tastes like bubblegum. The kiss feels perfect. Yow. Just definitely. I feel Corey's chest through his shirt. Skinny, but nice. I think about toning him up a bit. Nah. It's better to just go with his default settings. "So listen, there's a race tonight at the Speed Max track," Corey says. "The Crystal Cobras put out a challenge, and they're taking all comers. The prize is..." I don't really like racing. Corey thinks for a moment. A character animation. He looks cute thinking, his sharp eyebrows pressed together. Now he's taking too long. It's getting awkward. I think he's controlled by a Filipino, or maybe there's lag. He snaps back into action. "Okay, listen. There's gonna be a dance-off at the Club Heatwave. The Crystal Cobras put out a challenge, and they're taking all comers. The prize is 100K. Dancing? Yeah, that would be one way to try out my body. Sounds groovy, I say. But I can't help but think of another way to give this body a test drive. I slip my hand down into my tight purple skirt and feel my genitals. Ugh, yeeks. They really have everything working down there. Should I do it already? Just 5 minutes into the narrative? Why not? Everybody does it right away. Corey looks really good. I wonder what kind of dick they rendered him with. But no, I should go at least half an hour without slutting it up. Dancing will be fun. Corey holds out his arm like a gentleman, and I take it. He leads me down the front walk towards his car. A smeary old junk ride, with dents and rust all over it. Sorry, hun. It's only temporary, Corey says as we come up on the car. I promise you, By the end of this week, I'm gonna have a Ferrari 288 GTO, the fastest street legal car in the world. It's my dream. It's my obsession. I'll do anything to, but I'm not listening. There's something in the bushes by the road. I wonder if this is one of those fake-out horror narratives. I really hate scary stuff. I bend over and look into the bushes. A pair of shining eyes stares back at me. Ew, what the hell? There's an old naked lady hiding in the bushes. Yuck. This naked old lady hiding in the bushes looks like the beginning of a storyline I don't want to go down. I really wish I had looked at the summary closer. Who knew something called 80s Turbo Ascension would have artisanal porn in it? I consider saying my safe word to stop the narrative, but I don't feel like going through the loading process again. I should have loaded my feed splits, but I rushed through the setup. The old lady's bony arm shakes out of the bush and grabs my ankle. Certainly not. I yank my leg away and curse at her. Corey is looking at her with the same confused animation he used a moment ago. Is he already using the same animation? That's kinda low def. The crazy old lady comes stumbling out of the bush, her saggy old boobs flopping around. Yow. What kind of narrative is this? I pick up a nearby potted plant and smash it on her head. It breaks apart pretty nice, full of high-definition dirt. The lady falls on the ground and starts moaning. I back away to watch how the scene develops between Corey and her. It looks like her leg isn't quite attached to the rest of her. You can see the meat inside of her hip. Really low def. Corey just stands there, cycling through different animations. He turns to me and shrugs and says, "Hey babe, that's life." I stare at him. Is this how the storyline is supposed to go? He runs his hand through his hair and says, "Cute skirt." What the hell? This narrative is bugged up. "Let's go," I say, going to Corey's car and opening the door. It's an old hand drive with a fixed wheel. "You want me to drive?" Corey asks, coming over. "Yeah, maybe you better." A minute later, we're cruising down the freeway, listening to some oldie about a girl named Jessie. The scenery looks cool, with the blue freeway lights passing by and an old-fashioned neon metro in the background. Corey is running through his backstory, talking about the Ferrari or whatever. I can't ignore the fact that I feel a little bored. I'm just 10 minutes into my first direct sense feed narrative, and I'm already a little bored. Was the surgery really worth all that money? I don't even want to think about what it cost. I slip my hand into my skirt again and touch my genitals. It feels really nice. Everything is super sharp. I think about fucking Corey again, but I can't go back to feed fucking all the time. Every day. Why am I always bored with narratives after 10 minutes? Why am I bored with everything after 10 minutes? We pull up in front of Club Heatwave, a big glittering building with a neon sun shining above it. A line of gleaming black limos snakes through a colorful crowd out front. We park in the player spot across the street and head to the grand entrance, Corey leading me by the hand. Music thumps from within. People are waiting in line, but Corey says something to the bouncer, and we slip past. The entrance hall is all mirrors and neon. I can feel the beat of the music pass through my entire body. That's cool. The singer tells me to get out of his dreams and into his car. The inside is filled with shadowy bodies dancing through strobe lights and lasers and artificial fog. Cheesy, but kind of fun. It even has that fake fog smell. "Want to get some practice in?" Corey asks, giving my bum a little squeeze. Well, this one is naughty. We head out onto the dance floor and start to cut it up. Wow, Corey's dancing is terrible. Looks like a motion glitch. Guess they had to give him some old moves, but did they have to make it this bad? is kind of ruining the storyline. I look across the dance floor and see a tall man in a black suit with black hair, standing perfectly still among the dancing crowd. He's watching me with dark eyes. There's a sort of glow around him, so that I can tell he's going to be a part of a storyline. I lean over to Corey and ask, "Who is that?" Corey stares at the man for a moment, and runs his hands through his hair and says, "Cute skirt." "What the fuck, Corey?" The dark man comes across the dance floor, coming toward me. The other dancers don't move out of the way, and he passes through them without breaking his stride. Some programming. Now he stands in front of me, looking down at me with his gleaming black eyes. What an incredible render this guy is. I mean, this is outright art. Like Rembrandt level. Say what you will about the game's production. They really know how to build hot guys. It's like he's tailor-made to turn me on. Then I notice Corey standing right there, looking at us, all confused. He looks like a cheap plastic doll compared to this new guy. "What gives?" Corey asks. "Fuck off," I say. Corey gets this really heartbroken look on his face and says, "Listen to me, Zen Zen Zobakin. You'll break my heart if you go with any other guy. You got that? You are the most special, most beautiful girl I have ever met." I can't really get into a speech because it's too early in the narrative for that kind of stuff. Plus, he pronounced my name wrong. The new guy reaches out and grabs a handful of Corey's face. Literally, he just sinks his fingers into the face and tears a huge, bloody hunk out. Blood sprays everywhere. Holy shit. I guess this is a horror narrative. Is this guy like a vampire or something? Faceless Corey keeps standing there, spurting blood out of his head hole. I push him away. The new guy squeezes the hunk of flesh like a sponge, and lets the blood run down over my face, and starts licking it off. Yeep. This must be some kind of art porn sampler narrative. I've really got to start reading those summaries. Crucial. Despite how strange the situation is, I ignore it all and begin some steamy sex with this man. Even though I am lost in the moment, I can't help but notice that the light in the club has changed. It seems like it's coming from two angles, making everything seem doubled. I feel like I'm looking at the man's face from two angles, seeing four of his eyes. It's a weird effect, and I wonder if there's something wrong with my visual line. Next to me, a woman in a pink dress opens her mouth and her jaw floats away from her face. Her head floats off of her neck. Beside her, a man separates into a dozen slices. God damn it, this is definitely a fatal glitch. But I am so close to climax. It's gonna be fucking fabulous. I wonder if the narrative can hang together for just 10 more seconds before it crashes. All around us, the people begin to break apart, become floating parts. The weird lighting effect becomes more intense, and the man seems to be made of 4 sections, except each section is his entire face from a different angle. And they're all crossing each other, but staying in place at the same time. And 8 eyes are watching me. Oh fuck, this is hurting my brain. Fuck, I can't take this. The narrative should have already crashed back into safety mode. I say my safe word. Nothing happens. I feel my stomach drop in terror. Except it drops at 4 different places all around the room. Oh god. Am I stuck in a crashing narrative? They say it can fuck you up. I feel myself falling and expanding. One of my hands feels like it's way off on the horizon. Another is 10 stories below me. Body parts are swirling around us, showing all sides at once. The man is staring down at me with his awful eyes. How are they so awful? His face is as giant as a mountain range, as the entire sky. I'm seeing too much. No, above and beneath, everything has too many sides. Screaming. He has dozens of eyes, thousands of sides. Thousands and millions of eyes. God. When we got to the Clearview Hospital, it was like Karen said it would be. The emergency room was flooded with patients coming from Atlanta, but the readjustment center was empty, except for a lone staffer who was watching the lobby's wall set and praying. The set was showing footage of the black cloud over Atlanta, or maybe it was Denver, or Riyadh. 12 cities had gone up in the last hour. They weren't the largest or most powerful cities in the world. Hefei, Zhangzhou, Bengaluru. What was the pattern? What the hell had Bengaluru done to anybody? Karen said there was no real pattern. This is Q's opening move, her entrance into the world. She won't destroy everything, but she will kill and kill until she thinks we are ready for her demands. I found a wheelchair by the readjustment center's entrance and wheeled Karen down to the EMRT room. Somewhere, a hygiene bed's life alarm was ringing. I ignored it. My goal was to get Karen some muscle treatment. A single treatment probably wouldn't give her enough strength to stand on her own, but she could at least hold her head up and move her arms. She might regain her voice and sight. In the treatment room, I filled a treatment tub with the minty-smelling conducting gel and washed Karen off and fit her with breathing tubes. These were normally tech duties, stuff I thought I would never be doing again. Looking down at this little twig of a woman on the table, it occurred to me that all I had to do was tie off her breathing tube, and that would be the end of her. I asked her the question that kept coming into my mind. How do I know for sure that you didn't blow up Atlanta yourself? How do I know you aren't full of shit? My set was blank for a while before she answered. Well, how could I prove it? I tried to think of a way, some kind of test. I don't know, I said, finally. You know much about statistical proxy dilation tracing? No. Then it would be hard to prove it to you. So how do I know it wasn't you? You can't know. I need to know if I'm going to help you. Then learn about SPDT. I don't have time to learn about fucking SP-fucking-DT. Then you can't know. You're just dealing with stuff that's too advanced. I walked away from the table and sat down in a nearby chair. I felt like I was cracking up. The urge to cry had come and passed every few minutes. And it came again. I don't know what to do. I told you, we must get to upstate New York. There's a way to defeat Q. Maybe you are Q. Listen, before you put me in the gel, I want you to pull my jack battery. Cut it off. And that would prove you're not Q? Not really. I could have scripted everything. Oh. But it would mean I can't directly order nuclear strikes. Oh well, that's a relief, I said, rubbing my face and trying to blink away the fresh wave of tears. What's in upstate New York that's so important? There is a resource Q can't access, something she cannot defend against. What? Honestly, if you don't understand something simple like SPDT, you won't understand this. Fucking great, I said. We sat there in silence for a long moment. Finally, another message showed up. I'm not Q. I spent my life fighting Q. I fought Q instead of living a life. We still have a chance to win. We must win. I sighed and stood up and walked over to her. Well, then let's get started. Good. I found the jack patch on the back of Karen's neck and squeezed at the tattooed points. Her battery capsule slowly slid out of her skin like a giant blackhead. I disconnected the wire. Now she was completely disconnected from infraspace. I picked up her body and gently lowered it into the conducting gel. It took a minute for her to sink to the bottom, for the gel to slowly slide over her face, like a closing curtain. I dialed up to 90 minutes of muscle treatment, and 30 minutes of eye treatment, and started the tub up. I sat for a while, listening to the soft wobbling sounds of the gel shifting as Karen's muscles clenched and unclenched at rapid fire rate. This was the sort of spare moment where a person would stare at their set and look at a game replay or something. But my set was just a long list of red interrupts telling me about how everybody was dead. I realized that the hygiene bed's life alarm was still going off in some other room. Usually, when I heard that sound, I went racing to find out what was going on. But I had just ignored it. Well, the person was probably dead before we got here. What were the odds that they had just gone into arrest when we walked in the door? And who gave a shit anyways when 100 million people had also died today? Still, there was an instinctive part of me that wanted to run toward the sound, that wanted to help. I got up and walked down the hall. The ringing got louder. At the end of the hallway, there was a small room with 4 hygiene beds that had been brought in for in-hospital disconnection, a procedure usually reserved for really complex cases. The last bed was blinking red. I took a look at the readout, but it didn't show cardiac arrest. In fact, it was showing 260 beats per minute. It must have been malfunctioning. I looked at the patient chart. Zenzen Sobakin, 20 years old. Total connection duration, 47 minutes. It must have been a runtime crash. Unlucky. I pressed the seal button, and the bed lid opened. When she came into view, I staggered back and shouted for help. I sat Karen up in the electroconvulsive tub and wiped the warm gel from her face and detached the breathing tube. Her head rolled back, her face glistening in the glare of the LED. I could see the shape of the skull clearly through the wet skin. Slowly, she pulled her head upright, blinking the goo from her eyelashes. Hello? Hello, can you hear this? Yeah, I can hear you, I said. Wow, okay, it worked. Good, she said. Her voice was completely flat and surprisingly deep for someone so scrawny. I am here, she said, baring her teeth in what might have been a smile. Can you see anything? I asked. She opened her eyes wider and moved them around. Yes, persistent shapes, she said, pronouncing the word persistent like a child. Can you see how many fingers I'm holding up? No. Try squinting. Oh, right. That changes things. 2. She was right. Except she was looking at a completely different direction than my hand. Great, I said. Slowly, her knobby knees emerged from the gel, and she grasped them with her hands. It was a good sign for somebody in her state. It also showed that she knew some of the standard tests for emergence. We went through a few more of the tests and found that the treatment had worked well. She might even be walking soon. I got her out of the tub and washed her off and put her into some scrubs. She managed to sit upright on the table without leaning on anything, her bony arms set stiffly at her sides. "Can I ask you a question?" I asked. "Sure," she said in her deep, childish monotone. "What is Q?" "You want the whole story?" "Yeah." She took a deep breath. "Okay, so, approximately 50,000 years ago." She told me the story of Q as she knew it. From the beginning in prehistory, when the hyperspace code was inserted into the human genome, and she went all the way to right now, and the so-called plague of the flesh. Her description of the plague explained what happened to poor Zen Zen in her hygiene bed. It also explained the red butterfly thing I found in the other hygiene bed. If you are reading this, I guess you have access to her story as well. Hopefully she wrote down the whole history of Q, because I honestly didn't understand it all, and couldn't do it justice. If I had heard it on any other day than the day Atlanta was destroyed, I wouldn't have believed any of it. As it was, I just looked at it in a calm, detached way, as if I was just listening to another delusion. I guess you'll be reading her story before any of this even happens, so you'll be inclined to believe it even less. So at that point, I asked her how she knew so much about Q, like what its plans were and everything. She said Q had recently stopped hiding anything from her and the other bred soldiers. It was fully confident in its ability to win against them in any scenario. It no longer felt a need for any secrecy. I asked her why it had tried to kill her, and she said that it hadn't. It was planning to destroy Atlanta anyways. She had arranged for the assassin herself, an improvisation to get her out of the city more quickly. I asked her if her ability to see all those extra dimensions allowed her to see into the future. She told me that she could only see extra dimensions in the feed realm. It allowed her to fight against Q more effectively, because she can process information on a different level. She explained, when you look at a digital picture, you can process a huge matrix of color values all at once. If you try to process the same picture by looking at a list of color codes for each point, like R101, G254, B017, it would take forever and be incomprehensible. For certain problems, I have the same advantage over you that you have over a guy reading a list of color codes on a ticker. I can see many things all at once, but I can only see extra dimensions in the feed realm. Here, outside the realm, there seems to only be 3 dimensions plus 1 timeline. I can't see beyond that, but I can imagine beyond it. So you can't see the future? No, I can only imagine the future. I can imagine a lot of futures. Then why did you hire an assassin for yourself? I mean, that just seems like a really risky move, like something that was unlikely to pan out. Oh, I couldn't imagine any scenario where it wouldn't have worked. Really? What if I had just been like Fuck this, I'm out of here. Oh, come now. Nobody would do that. Nobody would do that. Almost everybody would do that. He had a gun. Wrestling over firearms is quite common. Maybe in feed narratives, but not in real life. You see stories about that kind of thing all the time in the news. We argued about this point for quite a while. It was like arguing with an intelligent child who has no clue about the real world. Her view of real life had been warped by seeing only the sensational parts of it that managed to leak into the feed realm. She seemed completely unaware of that most basic and fundamental fact of human life. That most of it is boring. That most of it is just waiting around. That people go through large portions of their lives tired and sleepy and wanting to lie down. I tried to convince her of this, but in her short time in the real world, she had experienced a murder, a drone strike, and a nuclear holocaust. So I wasn't having much success until, lo and behold, she got tired and wanted to lay down. I helped her into a gurney, and we made plans to head towards Plattsburgh in upstate New York. She said that the key to defeating Q was somewhere near there. Of course, she was lying to me, but I didn't realize it at the time. How the flesh dances and how the flesh plays, how the flesh toils and spins through its days. See the flesh happy and strapping and young. See the flesh sagging, dragging and glum. Shh. Hear now the giggling, see the shadows grow. Step down the hallway, each door aglow. Watch now the ceiling, sweet cradle rocks. Who made these puppets? Who made this clock? Ancient hand on the cradle, withered lips form a song. Golden wheels spinning backward, withered hand becomes young. The hands can spin, spin then slow. The clock is wound afresh. What is the key? Turn this time, by fingers made of flesh. I am 24, and it's a Friday night in early summer. The sun is settling down into a haze beyond the mountains, and the city's concrete is beginning to cool after a baking day. The signs for all the bars are turning on. The windows of stolid office buildings become a wild collage of reflected neon. Yes, everybody wants to party tonight. Even the Central Insurance Bank is looking festive. I've drunk 6 beers. I am right in the zone. Active, playful, charming. Oh so charming. I am actually charming myself right now, with my internal monologue, reeling off clever little observations about the people who pass on the sidewalk. I can see a glowing doorway in my mind. All I have to do is walk through it. My phone buzzes in my pocket. Who's calling me now? Maybe it's my usual gang of friends, or the Swedish friends I drank with until 6 a.m. last weekend, or one of the dozens of girls who are saved in my phone with thoughtful pet names like Brown Hair 2 and Metten Park. But I'm not going to answer my phone. I don't want to make any plans. I am simply going to walk down this street, and something is going to happen, because the door is open. The world awaits. I stand by a food vendor and watch people pass. I smile, nod, make funny comments. Most people smile and pass right by. Others linger for a while. 2 girls and a guy start talking to me. They're tourists from out of town. What are they looking to do? A nice place or just somewhere cheap? Do they like sake? I know just the place. Sure, no problem. And we're off. Soon we're sitting in a booth, and the sake is arriving at regular intervals, and I'm telling crazy stories and snapping off jokes, and I'm listening to them, and they're telling me about themselves, and one of the girls keeps glancing at me when she thinks I'm not looking, and I am 30, and I am in a darkened apartment, hunched over the glow of my laptop screen, jacking off. I finish and go to the bathroom to wash up, and there is that same moment, where I have to look at my blotchy face in the mirror and say, well, not my proudest moment. In my head, the same joke I make to myself every time. When I'm done, I stand in the doorway of my bathroom and look at the tiny studio apartment. A desk, a laptop, a futon, a small window with the curtains closed against the summer glare, a crowd of empty bottles on the floor by the door, the stink of old sweat and beer. I whimper. The door is closed. The door is closed forever. I am locked in this apartment, this little box, closed off to the world. Now that the jerking off is done, the jitteriness starts to creep back in. I want to drink, but it's only 3 p.m. I've only been awake for half an hour. I should wait until at least 8 before drinking. At least 6. But this is torment. I need some now or I will have some kind of fucking seizure. Just 2 shots, that's it. And then no drinking until I am 33. And I'm sitting in the 24-hour club, listening to a man talk about a mouse that changed his life. He had been living out of his car for a month, and it was so full of trash that a mouse started living there too. This was the problem that finally broke him, that finally showed him the absurdity of it all. I finally made him get sober. How do you set mouse traps in a car? It's a pretty good story, but I've heard it before. Stolid Haircut walks into the meeting, late again. I call him Stolid Haircut because I don't know his name. But he has a respectable Republican haircut, silver and gray and sculpted into broad curves that recall the body of a pre-gas crisis American sedan. He wears the uniform of a retiree, bright blue dad jeans with running shoes and white socks and a plaid shirt buttoned up to the next to top button. Stolid Haircut walks with the wide, clumsy steps of a hesitant toddler. Years of alcoholism have damaged his cerebellum, resulting in an abnormal gait. This and his reddened, venous nose make his weakness for alcohol plain for everyone to see. At a glance, you can know his most painful personal shame. His lips are permanently pursed into an embarrassed smile. I watched him ease into the chair and go back to listening about the mouse and find myself looking at him again. It's a tragic haircut. The haircut calls to me from some golden past. It is the haircut of a man who once was, in days gone by. It was thick and brown and belonged to a man who walked with a purposeful stride, a husband, and father. Kind of guy who hoisted his son onto his shoulders to watch passing parades, who played softball and relaxed with a few beers after work, and a few whiskeys after that, but always woke up bright and early the next day, who worked hard, who knew who he was, who knew right from wrong, who knows how the world ought to be. I stare at his soft, shining, embarrassed eyes and feel my own filling with tears. How it all has slipped away from him. The young son is grown, the job is done, the wife doesn't talk. Everything that once was strong and sure is now frail and shaky. How many nightmares has this ordinary man seen? I saw so many in just 10 years. And I am nowhere near the point of an abnormal gait. This man has seen unutterable things. How bewildered was he when it first came for him? The scuttling darkness. Did he think he was going mad? He comes from a generation where this sort of thing is not discussed. How he must have suffered. The haircut. The haircut. The bleeding drops of red. I am staring at him openly. The rest of the meeting is not there anymore. A halo of light pours out around his face, and he becomes a vision. Doves and cherubim swirl around him. Escher staircases extend in every direction. Mandalas expand and overlap and spin, and the door. My God. For a moment, the door is open again. Right now, the car is headed silent down the highway. It's dark and there's nobody driving. I snuggle up in my seat and listen to the hum of its parts. I have turned my set off. It shows nothing but reports of destruction and plagues. The world on fire. The world gone mad. Most of the interstates have shut down. They want people to stay in one place. The car is moving along the back roads, switching from one lonely little highway to another. We are headed towards the answer, towards the key to defeating Q. I hope we get there fast. Slowly, the sky pales, and the blue curves of the mountains emerge from the darkness beyond the guardrails. I heard once that the Appalachians used to be as high as the Himalayas. Looking at the sloping hills under the sky, I can sense the ancient shape of the world. A world that was here before us. Man, I'm getting pretty philosophical. In my mind, another shape appears. Massive, continental, the slope of human decline, the awful descent of the human race into... Christ, let's just enjoy the pretty mountains. Karen is lying in the back. She's doing another eye treatment with equipment we took from the hospital. Before we reach Plattsburgh, the car switches highways and heads west. The sun climbs higher. We are getting closer. Eventually, the car turns into an unpaved road. After a few minutes, it slows to a stop. And here we are. I look around. It's a nice bit of country scenery. Grass and trees and gentle hills and blue sky and pretty much fuck all. There is nothing here. Or whatever is here is hidden. Karen is still doing the eye treatment in the darkness of the van's rear. Light from the goggles seeps out in little flashes, sketching the shape of her face. Finally, the goggles turn green. She pulls them off, blinking and squinting. I go and help her set up. Can you see a little better? I ask. She looks down at her hands, moving the fingers slowly in the dark. Yeah. Persistent shapes. She raises her hand into a shaft of sunlight shining in from the front of the van. Her fingers catch the glow. My hands, she says softly, her voice quavering with disbelief. It's the first strong emotion I've ever heard from her. Good, that's great, I say. Well, we're here. What do we do now? She looks at me and smiles maniacally. We go into the forest, she says. Her smile is unnatural and stiff, more of a grimace than a smile. But for a brief moment, as it first spreads across her face, she looks like a giddy little kid. The key is there, she says. What is it? Some kind of secret underground base, a hidden laboratory. She makes a groaning sound that I barely recognize as laughter. You play too many narratives. It's much simpler than that. I unfold a wheelchair that we borrowed from the hospital and help her into it. When I open the back doors of the van, she winces against the bright sunlight. And again, her face looks like a little kid's for a moment. I give her a pair of huge black wraparound sunglasses that we took from the eye treatment center. The van lowers to the ground, and I roll the wheelchair out onto the dusty road. She makes sure I take a bag of supplies with us, snacks and drinks and other stuff. The sun is warm on my skin, but the breeze is fresh and cool. It's a perfect day. You would think that everything is right in the world. So where to? I ask. She looks around, her head wobbling on her thin stalk of a neck, her eyes hidden by the massive glasses. There was once a house here. Do you see it? I look around and spy a low, crumbled gray wall mostly hidden behind the high grass. I think I see an old foundation. That's it, she says. Her eyes are hidden. There's something in her voice that wasn't there yesterday. A shivery excitement. It makes me excited too. I push the wheelchair down a weedy gravel driveway toward the foundation. There's nothing else left of the house. It must have been torn down and hauled off. Karen has me push her around it and go down a trail leading towards the forest. What was that house? I ask. Anything important? I used to live there. I turn and give it another look, as if I would see some new detail in the crumbling concrete that I had missed. That was the old children's home. Yep. And where are we going? We're almost there, she says. It's close. We follow the trail into the forest. The trees become thick and shadowy. The wheelchair has a little power assist, but it's still tough to push it over all the roots and rocks that lie along the narrowing, twisting path. Oh yes, Karen whispers excitedly. Up ahead, sunlight gleams through the branches of the crowding trees. A wave of excitement moves through me, and I push Karen faster. We come out into a clearing, a broad patch of wild grass that glows green and golden in the sunlight. Here, Karen says. I stop the wheelchair and look around. At first glance, there doesn't seem to be anything here. So what's here? I ask. I used to come here as a child and play make-believe before I was connected. I take a walk around the clearing looking for something, a hatch, a hole, an actual key lying in the grass. There is nothing. Across the clearing, Karen is slowly pulling off her sunglasses. When her eyes appear, they startle me. They are wide and gleaming with utter fascination. I walk up to her. She is staring at something. Tears fill the rim of her eyes and spill over. What is she looking at? It seems to be something right in front of her. Something I can't see. I stand beside her and crouch so I can see what she is seeing. There is nothing there but a small cloud of gnats. What are you looking at? I asked. She looked all around, takes a deep breath and shudders. There's more, she whispers. More what? They said the feeds were complete, but they were wrong. I wait for her to say more, but she doesn't. What do you mean? I ask. She looks at me and smiles, the most goofy, crazed smile I've ever seen, tears still flowing down her cheeks. The designers of the feed said that it provides a complete experience. Enough colors, enough frames, enough smell gradients, enough complexity to make it indistinguishable from reality. But they were wrong. Here, look at them, she says, raising her hand into the air. You mean the gnats? Yes. The gnats are glowing specks, dancing senselessly in the sunlight. I wonder if some pattern will emerge. Can Karen control them with her mind? Is that the secret? Are they forming shapes? But they just dance and dance, forming nothing, making no pattern that I can see. I feel silly for even thinking that they would. They're gnats. I turn away. A flood of angry thoughts rushes through my mind. Gnats. Fucking gnats? She's a nut. She's lost it. Yeah, she's powerful and impressive in the feed realm. But now she is in the real world. And she has completely lost her shit. And this whole trip has been a waste. Is there anything here? I ask. What's the key? Seriously, don't give me any of that bullshit like I can't explain or you'll see. Just tell me. What are we doing here? What is the plan? The crazed look of joy fades from her face and is replaced by a look of a scolded child. She lets her head hang and wipes the tears from her face with her weak little hands. I feel bad. I kneel by her chair and say, I'm sorry. Please, just tell me what your plan is. I need to know now. Karen begins, speaking softly without looking up. Q has base control of every major system in the world. Every drone, every rover, every defense robot, all orbital assets, all nuclear weaponry. She has control over most human political systems. She has destroyed or contained every existing countermeasure, including me. There is no scenario in which we could ever reacquire control. Not with 1,000 times our current resources. Not with 1,000 years of computation time. So then what's the plan? What we need is a way for Q to be destroyed by just one or a few motivated individuals. I believe there was points in the past when this could have happened. Maybe one of the Germans overseeing the early research program could have stopped it. Maybe it could have been stopped around 2020, when the portals were shut down, and interface research was temporarily abandoned. But it didn't happen. Currently, at this point, there is no way for it to happen. Q has control of far too many assets. The war is already lost, irrevocably. Then what do? We must hope that there are alternate timelines and that somebody in one of these timelines foresees what is happening to us right now. That somebody foresees this very moment in time and takes steps to prevent it. I stare at her. She looks into my eyes. I grope for words. Is that... Wait, alternate timelines. Is that the plan? We have to send a message back into the past? In a sense. Then the person who receives this message will destroy Q in the past, and that will save us. Karen shakes her head slowly. No, that clearly won't happen, or everything would already be different. We are utterly doomed. We'll either be incinerated in a nuclear strike or rounded up and incorporated into Q. There is no stopping that. The only hope to defeat Q is on some other timeline, if such a thing exists. There's no hope for us, at all. Then what are we doing here? Why are we in this fucking clearing? Haven't you felt it? Felt what? The feeling that you're inside a narrative. An eerie shiver comes over me. I look around at the clearing. Like I'm inside a feed. No, inside a narrative. A story in somebody's mind. Doesn't this all seem just like a story? Two people rushing off to save the world, to find some hidden key in the forest. Yeah, it all seems pretty unbelievable. That's how I wanted it to feel. That's why we came out here. So that we can be inside a story. Now, hopefully, there's somebody out there in the past who will write the story. Write the story? What? So there's nothing out here. There's no magic key or secret underground base. Well, this story sucks. Why? It's a huge fucking letdown. Karen makes a mild choking sound that might be a chuckle. I slump down into the grass beside her wheelchair and hang my head. I'm out in the woods with a crazy person. She doesn't even make sense. She spent too long in 5D. She's talking about alternate timelines. Finally, I ask her, so we're just fucked, right? If you look toward our future, if you look at the series of events which will happen to us, they are dark. They are very awful. We will suffer. We will die. But that would be true in any timeline. On the other hand, if you look at the entire story, not as a series of events, not from beginning to end, but as a single, continuous, connected shape, where every event is occurring simultaneously, I think my life, even my stupid little life, which I spent mostly inside that hygiene bed, could form a beautiful shape. I snort. I'm tired of this cryptic bullshit. Karen goes on. Maybe that shape reaches back to some place where somebody can see it and change things. I don't say anything. Karen reaches into our bag of supplies, pulls out one of the little paper notebooks she bought at the gas station. "What are you doing?" I ask. "I'm going to write a poem. Do you want a notebook?" "What for?" "Maybe there's somebody out there who needs you to write a story." "Who would read it? Isn't everybody going to die?" "Who knows?" she says and drops the other notebook into my lap. "Maybe somebody would be interested." I toss the notebook off into the grass. Fucking pointless. I can barely write on paper anyways. We sit in silence for a long time. When I look up, Karen is staring at the same little cloud of gnats, occasionally jotting stuff down. I find myself staring at them too. They look like nothing more than living specks of dust, worked into a crazy, whirling frenzy. Is there any pattern in how they move? Would it matter if there was? I think about what Karen said about the shape of her life, what it would look like if everything happened simultaneously, if it could all be seen at once. I think about the shape of my own life. I stare at the gnats and imagine seeing every position of every gnat all at one time. What kind of shape would it make? Even if I could see it, would this shape have any meaning? I pick up the notebook and begin to write. Before writing this series, I wrote a novel. I worked on it for 6 years, the worst years of my life. As I sank deeper into alcoholism and became a pathetic, trembling recluse, I held on to the novel as my one desperate hope. Maybe it would turn out well. Maybe it would get published. Maybe it would sell well. Maybe my life would change. Maybe I would escape my stinking little apartment. What dreams I had. What desperate little dreams. As my life got worse, I told myself I was on a journey of self-discovery, that I was an artist going through a period of struggle before my great breakthrough. Every famous artist has some story of living in a tiny apartment and working a mind-numbing job and eating crap food before their first big success. Surely this was just part of my story. How much richer would my success be after all this pathetic degradation? After a night of writing, I would get drunk and imagine myself being interviewed in front of an auditorium full of my fans, telling self-deprecating but touching anecdotes about my ragged days before I became a literary success. The audience, full of bookishly pretty young women, would titter and sigh as they related to my struggles and admire my unwavering determination. What fantasies I had. There were other times when I knew that I was just comforting myself with delusions of grandeur, that I was trying to romanticize my lazy failure of a life by pretending to be a struggling artist on the verge of success. Really, I was just a lazy drunk on the verge of fuck all. I wasn't even some proud rebel drunk like Charles Bukowski. I hated myself. I didn't write enough or read enough or know enough or work hard enough to be a real writer. I had never read Anna Karenina or 100 Years of Solitude or anything by Henry James. I was often bored when reading and bored when writing. Did I even like it? I had half-assed my way through school and work and relationships. I had half-assed everything I have ever done. and I was even half-assing something that was supposed to be important to me. I hadn't even finished one novel after 6 years. And then there was the most damning evidence of all. My writing sucked. Sometimes I felt like I was a fraud. Sometimes I felt like I was on the right path. Sometimes I felt like both of these things were true at once. Like I was on 2 different timelines. My view on the matter changed often. At night, I tended to regard myself as being on the very cusp of fame and fortune. The next morning, I tended to wake up feeling like an untalented dilettante. Meanwhile, this supposedly temporary period of struggle stretched on and on and on. I turned 30. Surely something would happen by 40. But what if it didn't? As I withdrew from friends and co-workers, it became more of a recluse. I rationalized it as concentrating on my writing. Except my busy schedule of drinking and hangovers didn't allow for much writing. The story of the struggling artist was showing itself to be a lie. Then I got fired from my job and sent to rehab. After I stopped drinking, I used my newfound energy and spare time to finish the novel. I finished it in a few months. You can get a lot done when you're not entering the void every night. For someone like me, the completion of a 6-year struggle is an occasion which simply begs to be accompanied by a drink. By many drinks. I had always planned to just go get drunk for an entire week after I finished my novel. Instead, I took a walk down to a nearby bar and stood outside of it for a while. I didn't go in. In my head, my life seemed to be developing into a new story, a heroic turnaround in which I got sober, and everything fell into place. Yes, surely this was how it would go. I sent letters to 30 literary agents with the hopes of getting the book published. None expressed any interest. It hurt to be rejected. I had stopped drinking, but I still hadn't found a fulfilling job. I was able to talk to people and look cashiers in the eye again, but I was still a recluse. I had still invested a lot of desperate hopes into getting the novel published. I felt so foolish for investing so much hope into something that is just so unlikely. But I couldn't help myself. The lure of feeling some sense of purpose and accomplishment was just too much. I wanted to be noticed. Honestly, I wanted to be rich and famous. Though they may have been disguised as achieving artistic success and finding my purpose. Perhaps my dreams were ultimately as crass and grasping as any Kardashians. I had given the literary agents 4 months to respond to me before accepting that they were not interested. Soon after that deadline passed, I started writing this web series. As you may know, a few websites wrote articles about the series, and some very lovely people created a very wonderful subreddit about it. And this drew the attention of people in the publishing industry. They contacted me, and just like that, my long-held dream was again revived, and now it seemed more in reach than ever. I had been struggling to contact agents, and now they were contacting me. What a heady feeling. Again, it felt like everything was falling into place, like my life was shaping into a story with a happy ending. Speaking of endings, I need to come up with an ending for this series before I could finally take my rightful place as the leading light of the literati. A few people in the subreddit had expressed doubt that I could possibly deliver a satisfying ending, and I was inclined to agree with them. I had already noticed that the story was easier to write when I was opening narrative threads than when I was wrapping them up. What would the overall ending be? It had to be about Mother. That was the center of the story, but What did I really know about Mother beyond a few vague memories? I had long puzzled over these memories. Back when I was drinking, I was convinced that something had happened to me one summer, something beyond my understanding, something monstrous. But after I got sober, I was encouraged to digest some hard truths about myself, and I decided that it was entirely possible that I had more or less made it all up. Not that I simply lied to myself, but more that I had latched onto some vague memory, perhaps a reoccurring nightmare, and built it up in my mind over the years, perhaps as an explanation for why I was so emotionally fucked up. It was easier to face life as a victim of some unknown, half-remembered evil. It gave me an excuse to crawl into the bottle. I needed to provide a satisfying ending to the series and to my quest to get published. Being intertwined, both of these tasks rested on a hazy collection of sinister memories. Then again, couldn't I just make some shit up? Hadn't I been doing that all along? The solution presented itself to me one night when I was talking with my roommate Sean. He told me back when he smoked crack, he used to break into abandoned buildings to see if there was stuff to steal. He said that once he broke into a warehouse downtown and found a set of stairs that led to an underground room, which led to even more rooms that went deep underground. Over the course of a few weeks, he went deeper and deeper into the complex, taking various stuff, but always leaving quickly, because it was a spooky place. On the last night he snuck into the complex, he found a room where the walls were covered in human bone. So there I was on the front porch with Sean, both of us sitting in rickety old chairs, slapping away the mosquitoes, when he mentioned quietly that he had once seen a room where the walls were covered with human bone. Right away, my heart started thumping in my chest. He must have seen my Reddit post. This was something I had been worrying about, even dreading. My posts were none too flattering of him, and he was a very private person, very defensive of his boundaries. He would see it as an intrusion and a betrayal. I had taken great pains to obscure the details of his identity, giving him a new name and a different sort of Afrocentric religion. Nobody would recognize him from my post, but some of the stuff in my writing had been taken verbatim from our conversations. If he saw them, he would surely recognize himself. Sean was not a guy I wanted to piss off. When he first came to the house, he told us that his main character defect was his temper, and he wasn't kidding. On more than one occasion, I had watched anger build up inside of him until he ended up chewing somebody out. It was a sort of scene that left me tiptoeing back into my bedroom, giddily thankful I wasn't taking the brunt of his outrage. All those years as a recluse had left me with no appetite for confrontation. Sean had been sincerely working on his temper. He was the only black dude in the house, and he was worried about being seen as the angry black guy. He often said to me, "You get up in somebody's face and they'll be like, 'Say fellas, let's work this thing out.' But if I cross the line, they'll be like, 'Call the police, this dude's gone crazy.'" I assured him that this was not the case, while not being entirely sure that this wasn't the case. As a result of his fears, he had become very indirect about how he expressed his anger. If he felt somebody was disrespecting him, he would give them the silent treatment for a while, then come down hard on them for something small, all the while being very careful not to raise his voice or make any threatening gestures, which somehow made him more intimidating. As much as he didn't want to play out the angry black guy stereotype, I didn't want to play out the meek, affronted white guy stereotype. but I was sometimes intimidated by him. So now when he told me about the walls covered with bone, I figured he must have been feeling me out, seeing if I would come clean about what I had written. But it was such a strange way to do it. I didn't know what to say. I looked him in the eye, trying to make my face completely natural. He gazed back at me, his face half in shadow, half colored by the yellow porch light, his expression dead serious. He went on, speaking softly. Skulls, teeth, arms and hands melted together on the walls, up on the ceiling. He had seen in real life what I had only seen in my mind. He was about to tell me that the flesh interfaces and Mother and all the other nightmares were true. I had, on some level, known this was coming. It was the culmination of the strange feelings I had all week. It started when I was sitting in that AA meeting, looking at the sad face of the old man with a stolid haircut. I had entered a strange and sudden reverie, carried away by the sheer damn poignancy of this man's haircut, and how it symbolized the sort of strong, upright man he had tried and failed to be. I saw him in a great shifting vision, different versions of him emerging and overlapping. Here he was a young boy learning how to use a comb. Here he was a young man, the wind ruffling his sturdy locks as he experienced that rush of confidence that comes with drink. Here he was, in front of the mirror, running the comb through his wet hair with a shaky hand, dropping it into the sink. Here he was with stitches just below the hairline, after another accidental fall. Here he is finally, face down at the bottom of his stairs, his hair ever so slightly muzzed, just a few strands out of place, almost perfect. The next day, my roommate, Donnie, the ex-Marine, and I went out to the river to swim. It was a perfect sunny day, and there were a lot of people out swimming and floating along in inner tubes. As I lay back in the cool waters, feeling the warm forest of air alive on my wet skin, I saw for a moment that vanished primeval world, peopled by the forest children. These children lived along the river, not working or toiling, but simply taking what the river offered, living and dying by the good mother's generosity. Sure, they wouldn't know the benefits of writing or agriculture, and they would drop like flies to horrible diseases and predators. But in doing so, they would accept their humble place in the universe, rather than striving to overcome it through science or religion. They would know themselves to be fragile things which lived for a brief moment and died, like glimmers on the river's water. For the second time in as many days, I found myself with tears in my eyes over some trivial moment, and I was forced to turn away from Donnie as he related a story about Marine Buddy, who had been given a humorous nickname by the platoon due to his uncanny knack for finding and acquiring venereal diseases. In AA, they talk about not struggling or trying to manage everything, but rather letting God manage it. Not believing in an interventionist God, I had to interpret this as simply trying to accept the things I cannot change. I saw a vision of my life where I was able to accept life's vicissitudes with humility and grace, and where life opened itself to me as a result. With it came a wave of nostalgia. Last time I felt this, I had been in college and taking a lot of acid. How long had I shut myself away from life in that goddamn apartment with that goddamn bottle? I had been unable to accept any discomfort or unhappiness, so I had avoided everything except liquor. I had tried to control my feelings, and as a result, I found discomfort and unhappiness like I never imagined. But now I could accept life, embrace life, welcome all the awkwardness and frustration and pain and indignities. How many opportunities were right at my fingertips? I could talk to one of these girls wearing the smart bathing suits and be married in a few months. Or just find a friend. Or be hired as staff writer at some kind of pastry magazine. Anything was possible. I saw now the glowing door open before me. I saw all the doors open. All the doors open in a line. One after another. And behind them all, there was what? I couldn't say. The insight slipped away without revealing itself. But the fading reverie left a warm glow. I dipped my head back into the cool water and looked up into the sky crowded with bright, weightless clouds. I could see now that so many things were coming together in my life. I was getting sober. I was learning to talk to people. Even the dream of being a novelist, the dream was coming true. So now when Sean told me about the walls covered with bone, it seemed like yet another thing falling into place. But this time it was something sinister. Something so awful I thought it couldn't be real. Now it seemed that whatever force was bringing my dreams to life was also acting on my nightmares. I looked Sean in the eye, trying to make my face completely neutral. He gazed back at me, his face half in shadow, half colored by the yellow porch light. I asked him very carefully, "Is this something you read about on the internet?" He shook his head and said, "No, man," and looked down into his lap. I needed to find out exactly what was going on, even if it meant giving myself away. I asked him, "Have you been reading my Reddit post?" He squinted at me and asked, "Reddit? What is that?" So it was real, after all.